Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Rotten Tomatoes is Wrong. We are back in studio. I am Mark Ellis. As always, Jacqueline Coley is here. And Jacqueline, what a flick we have to talk about. We've been holding off on talking about this movie in order to get one guest in particular. There's many guests that probably saw this movie in the theaters when they were kids. Everybody grew up playing this video game upon which the movie's based, but there's one particular guest that we needed to have. That's why I'm excited today.
Yeah, and I would say that, we were just waiting for this moment for him. that is the advertisement we're putting down, but we're just glad he's here.
It's happening now, late though it may be. Mr. Andre Meadows joining us. You know him better as Black Nerd Comedy in all corners of the interwebs. You have a thriving YouTube channel. As we were talking about before we went to air, there's a lot of other facets to being a personality online now. So you got all the social media stuff, doing Instagram, doing TikTok, but Black Nerd Comedy is where you can find Andre and all of his greatness. He celebrates movies, guys. Remember when we used to do that? Remember before we used to tear movies down and dissect them like a frog in biology class? Andre sort of puts it all back together and reminds us why we love celebrating this stuff in the first place. And our movie that we have today, Andre.
What a one to celebrate. Trust the fungus. Trust the fungus.
You're gonna have to take some magic mushrooms here, and hopefully they give you some fire, some stars, some growth. And that is, of course, Super Mario Brothers. From 1993, we are obviously doing this in anticipation of the Super Mario Brothers movie, which comes out. As of this recording, I think it's either out last night or tonight. So that movie is from Illumination, and that is 100% entirely animated. So get a lot of great vocal talent. Everybody's looking forward to this movie. This could be like $1 billion plus grosser, but not necessarily similar to the 1993 version, which was called Super Mario Brothers, and I would say loosely based on the video games that they had at the time.
Yes.
The movie didn't quite do at the box office what I think this new one is going to be, but we're going to get into that. And I also want to give an editorial shout out on our website right now, RottenTomatoes.com. You can check out 10 awesome video games that were made into terrible movies. So you got your Hitman on there, you got your Mortal Kombat Annihilation on there.
I was going to say just 10?
Super Mario Brothers.
There's more. It's the truly terrible. Not questionable, not bad. We're not even in Assassin's Creed's territory on this one. We're talking
the worst of the worst.
The second Tomb Raider.
Okay.
I think Max Payne might be on that list somewhere.
Yeah.
And because again, Super Mario Brothers, and we'll talk about it once we get into the movie talk segment, but I think that there's some fun to be had, if for no other reason. The nostalgia of even this movie kind of reminds you just how movies were made, how products were turned into, how other source material was adapted into films back when we were all so very young. We also have 49 video game movies ranked by the Tomato Meter. That's another article you can click on the site. Werewolves Within is currently number 1.
Oh, wow.
2021. Okay. Super Mario Brothers, it's hanging in there at number 21. So it's still...
That's sad.
Look, if you're AP top 25, that's good in college basketball. It may not be quite as shiny according to the Tomato Meter.
That's a D+ student. That's still passing, right? You will get out of college on that one.
Honestly, if that's what you're getting out of college with, you shouldn't go. Stay home.
True.
Now Jacqueline has to really get her PhD on here because before we get to 2 Minutes with Tim, and then we're going to talk with Andre about what's going on with him and all this Super Mario Brothers greatness, and I say that in quotes, Jacqueline, what we do on this show sometimes, we've drifted away from it occasionally because we've been covering some super popular movies or sets of movies that everybody knows and loves. We're going to do a synopsis today simply because I don't have to be the one that does it. So I'm going to go ahead and toss you the ball and ask you this question. I've been dying to ask you since I met you.
I can't wait to hear this.
Jacqueline, what is the 1993 Super Mario Brothers movie about? Go.
First of all, as we say D's get degrees, be prepared for a D+ synopsis. I know this is the grade I'm getting going into it, and I'm going to rise to that occasion. Listen.
It's pass-fail with the synopsis.
Yes.
Really? I was going with the D in the better hopes. Pass-fail, I'm questionable. Listen, So we're taking ourselves back to New York of the 1990s, ladies and gentlemen. This is a dirtier New York.
Before Giuliani cleaned it up.
Definitely before Giuliani cleaned it up. This is more the New York of Coming to America. So it is dirty, it is dingier. Well, it turns out way, way, way long time ago, 65 million years ago, there was a meteorite that hit that very spot, and it actually made two separate dimensions that overlay on top of each other in New York. There is the one that had like dinosaur-like things, and then there's the New York that we get to know. And they both developed alongside each other. Eventually, we find our two plumbers, Luigi Mario and Mario Mario. They are brothers. They are bickering. Mario is the older one. Luigi is the younger one, played by the very Hispanic John Leguizamo and the very British Bob Hopkins. But they are Italian plumbers without Italian accents. Very good New York accents, though. Anyway, they have been tasked to figure out what is going on with this fungus infestation, which is really what it seems like these two worlds are beginning to meld. They come across this girl named Daisy, who seems very interested in this fungus, and they somehow get transported into the dino dimension. And inside the dino dimension, they find Koopa, all of his crazy minions. He is the mayor, leader of this separate dimension, and they are trying to invade into the modern human world. They were all evolved from dinosaurs. They were all evolved from dinosaurs. And now, even though they have some of the characteristics of dinosaurs, they look like humans. That is played by Dennis Hopper. All kinds of hijinks ensue. They eventually come to realize that the fungus is trying to help them. It's because the fungus is actually the king, been melded into a fungus. They figure out a way to undo that. And everyone lives happily ever after. There's a romance somewhere in between there, between Daisy and Luigi, which is awkward and silly. Oh, and Daisy studies the fungus.
Hey!
Yeah, that was pretty good.
I think I got it, right?
That was.
That's a good book report.
I think I got it. And
that
the reason
made it sound coherent. That makes the movie sound coherent.
That is what happened, ladies and gentlemen. But I just want to go ahead and state that the only reason why I'm also doing this is because y'all can't even watch it. Because if anybody wanted to go watch this movie right now, you better get to eBay.
Oh, I got it.
Oh, did Andre bring?
We gotta go physical media with this.
We have it.
Oh my God.
Yes, it.
Can I hold the DVD
Yes,
in my
please,
hand real
please,
quick?
please.
This is
Classic.
Andre brought this in. I watched this movie in pieces on
like-
YouTube. And this is just, the
serious?
Washington Post says, it's a blast.
Who
See?
said that?
The Washington
Who
Post.
said that?
A very
That was not
reputable
Ann
newspaper.
That was not Ann Hornaday. I want to see who wrote that.
May or may not be owned by a future owner of the Washington Commanders. So
Oh my
that's very
God.
exciting. It is also eye-popping special effects.
Yeah.
Is another good.
The 60-second preview. You know, this was back in the time when they used to have fakes reviews.
No, you're not
No,
accusing the
You know
Super
what?
Mario
It's
Brothers
a blast.
DVD.
How much you want to bet it says, like, when Tim comes in there, I bet it says, it's a blast if you want to die. How much you want to bet that that's what this really is?
There's an exclamation point. That is the end of a sentence.
Well, it's
Oh, no, she's gonna look it
actually
up.
acts as a perfect transition to our
Yeah.
next segment because we're about to throw it over to our buddy Tim Ryan, who's going to tell us what the critics, like the Washington Post, like 60-second preview, were saying about Super Mario Brothers when it was released in 1993. Tim is, of course, our expert review curation manager here at Rotten Tomatoes. So, Tim, you only got 2 minutes. Good luck.
2 minutes with Tim.
Once video games became big business, it was inevitable that Hollywood would attempt to cash in. But one of the immediate problems was, how do you craft a narrative out of something that is essentially narrative-free? And by imposing such a narrative, aren't you taking away what's special about the games? So in the 1982 Pac-Man cartoon series, the titular hero was a working stiff with a wife and kid. And on Saturday's Supercade the following year, Frogger was a reporter and Donkey Kong was on the lam after escaping from the circus. At least Pitfall Harry actually explored jungles like he did in the game. Ironically, while Super Mario Bros. Had a slightly more defined narrative than those other games, when it came time to make the movie, there was even greater disagreement over what it should be like. The Super Mario Bros. Movie was what can politely be described as a troubled production. It had multiple scripts, arguments over whether it was a movie for kids or a dark satire, stars Bob Hoskins and John Leguizamo drinking on set, and lots of finger-pointing when it flopped. It's developed something of a cult following in the ensuing years, but critics and audiences were roundly disappointed upon its release, feeling it lacked what made the game special while also not working on its own. Super Mario Bros. Is rotten at 29% on the Tomato Meter with 42 reviews, and it has a 29% audience score. So what did the critics have to say? In a rotten review, Stephen Hunter of the Baltimore Sun wrote, "Devotees of the game may derive some pleasure from seeing its obstacles given quasi-flesh and set in motion. But that inert pleasure soon pales in a torrent of none too special effects, confusing storylines, and characters without personalities." However, in a fresh review, Roger Hurlburt of the South Florida Sun-Sentinel wrote, "Bizarre, replete in often stunning special effects, and very strange from the outset, Super Mario Bros. Is curiously entertaining, even though it often makes little sense." So that's Super Mario Bros. And if you require further listening, check out our episode on video game movies. And we've also got one episode each for 2 different Mortal Kombat movies. Back to you, folks.
That drinking story is actually true. So we'll talk about that and a whole lot of other things. Thank you so much, Tim. I also have the full review from the Washington Post. Hal Hinson is who said it's a blast, and that's what's on the DVD cover. Hal's full review, or at least a fuller snippet, says, "This movie, which was directed by music video whiz kids Rocky Morton and Annabelle Janko, is sweet and funny and full of bright invention. In short, it's a blast."
No, he was sincere. I saw.
See?
He doesn't write anymore.
That was it. That was the swan song.
I didn't say that. I just said he doesn't write anymore. I'll let you determine what that means.
In short, the question that we always ask of our guests here, Andre Meadows, you're up. Is Rotten Tomatoes wrong about Super Mario Brothers from 1993, which is 29%?
Well, first you have to give credit that this is probably one of the few times where the critics and audience score is literally exactly the same.
It is at 29%.
You're always on a line with some things. So I say to all of you that, yes, you are wrong. Rotten Tomatoes is wrong. The audience is wrong. I'm not saying it needs to be a whole lot higher, but I just think 29% is a little because there are definitely some things in this movie that, given what is in this movie, even with all the troubles of production, and given when it came out and what movies were like at that time, I think it should be a little bit higher. And I think there's still some things about Super Mario Bros. That I like about that I would like to see even some movies of today. So.
Okay, so it's too low for Andre Meadows. Jacqueline Coley, 29%, as Andre intimated with both the critics and the audiences. Did everybody get it wrong?
I feel bad. Like, I invited you here, and I'm just going to rip on this movie because it's awful. But it's like The Room level awful, where I level in its stupidity. I'm literally like, oh my God, get stoned and watched it.
Well, see,
it's
that's the
amazing.
Thing. That's where we're in agreement. Like, it's one of those, like, I'm never gonna say it's a good movie, but I'm going to say that from an entertainment perspective, it is a very entertaining movie, and it's one of those movies where I can kind of see what they were trying to go with, but then of course you have the multiple scripts and the drinking in there.
So the reason why I say this is, if you're taking this movie seriously, Rotten Tomatoes is sober as a judge. This should be lower.
That's
if you were taking this
point.
as a camp masterpiece of stupidity and like, how did this get made and why does everyone involved in it need to be ashamed of it? Yes, this is certified fresh. This is the greatest movie ever made. If you look at this movie and are like, I want to make sure everyone involved in it doesn't go to film school. Yes. Like, legitimately.
I want to make sure everybody comes out of this smelling horrible.
You know what I mean? If you want to revel in how awful this is and even celebrate in the ridiculousness of it to where it became iconic, we are here.
Okay,
if you try to tell me anything other than that, I will hit you in the face.
I think there's a little bit of a middle ground if you're going to go from this movie being extremely horrible, like comparing it to The Room. So The Room is different, but 29%.
Only based on budget. The delusion that allowed them to make The Room allowed them to make this.
You also had a big difference that we'll talk about in movie talk between The Room and this. I'm going to say Rotten Tomatoes. Upon rewatching it, I'm going to say 29%. I'm not going to like protest. I'm not going to like make a sign and like stand outside Rotten Tomatoes.
Why
be like,
not?
Come on. I'm going to be like, I can get this to the 30s. I can get this to the 35 percentile.
I think you just need to be in some shit. That's why you want to put it in the 30s.
That's why we're going to talk about it
Yeah.
right now with our movie talk segment. Hit the music, Brian. So before we even get to the movie, when did Super Mario Brothers, when did the Nintendo Entertainment System first enter our lives? We were like the last family on the block to get a Nintendo, but back in the day, you could go to a video store and you could rent the entire Nintendo
System, I remember that,
system.
yeah.
So we rented it a couple times, have like a test drive with this thing. And I remember like we'd play Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt, and it was just like, this is the most I'm never going outside again. This is so exciting. And then 2 days later, you got to take it back to the video store. One day my dad came home. This is shortly before we moved from Columbia, Maryland to Virginia when he got out of the service, and he had the Nintendo with him, and we lost our minds, and we just played Super Mario Brothers that entire summer till we moved, and then we played it once we got to Virginia instead of making friends. So it was very exciting to hear that there was a Super Mario Brothers movie that was going to be coming out. But again, Andre, you're our guest. When you first stumbled upon the Nintendo Entertainment System and our beloved brothers who are plumbers, where were you? What was going on?
Well, yeah, Nintendo was kind of like the level of how you made friends for quite some time. Because if you were in the neighborhood, you had a Nintendo, everybody wanted to go hang out at your place. The more games you had, the more friends you would want to have to come over. And it was one of those things of like, it became like the Starbelly Sneeches. Of like, are you you're a kid to have a Nintendo or don't have one? And your friendship mattered with that. So it was like, it was something that everybody on the block wanted to have. And I remember finally getting mine Christmas morning. My parents, you know how sometimes you have
How
those
old were
parents,
you?
old enough.
No, I mean, what Christmas was it like that you
this
got
would
it?
be Christmas.
Like, I'm just trying to picture the age you were.
Yeah, like 87, 88. It was when the action set, because there was like the original Nintendo with Rob the Robot, but then they had the action set with the Zapper and Mario Brothers.
So we're talking maybe an 8, 9-year-old.
So
that's getting this.
so what
That's
happened?
fairly early in Nintendo's
that's fairly
matriculation.
early, yeah.
We were going over to Andre's house.
Yeah. Well, no, but we'll get there.
Yeah, but like
Wow.
88. But like 88, 89. So that was the thing. It was like when you got that system, it was like such a like an extra rite of passage to now having that. And I remember I had those parents that was like, "Oh, you're not getting that. That costs too much money.
Yep.
We're not getting into this house. You got an Atari. You're good. You know." So, but then of course, there's that one Christmas they're like, "All right, we went out to Toys R Us last minute, and there happened to be one on the shelf, so we hooked you up." And and then so that was what sort of the beginning of it. But like it was the system that kind of started it, but then like that's when the obsession came in.
Yeah.
Because it was like, then you got Super Mario Brothers 2. Then you got Nintendo Power Magazine coming in the mailbox. Then you got the Super Mario Brothers Super Show cartoon coming on. And all of this, and then Super Nintendo with Super Mario World after Mario 2 and Mario 3. And then this all leads up to this movie. And so at this point, I am so in the Mario cult. Like I am so like ready for anything Mario gives me that when I see this movie's coming out, even with everything shown to me of like, they literally say in the movie, this ain't no game. I'm still like, I'm ready. I'm ready to do this. And saw it day one when it opened, and saw it a couple more times in the theater because I don't know if everyone remembers these. There used to be the Dollar Theater.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
After the short run, and Mario Brothers
Still
run.
have the Dollar Theater.
They're still around a little bit. Yeah. But like, Mario Brothers run was a little short.
There's a movie that came out a couple weeks after Super Mario Brothers that sort of ended every other theatrical run up to that point.
Yeah.
With dinosaurs on top of that.
It did have dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Mario had the dinosaurs first.
Yeah.
By a couple weeks.
Yeah.
And then
and
a
it's-
little movie called Jurassic Park came out.
Yeah.
I know you have to, because I think they said something about like I think some people that worked on Jurassic Park actually saw the Yoshi that's in Super Mario Brothers, and you could just imagine them being like, "Oh, that's cute, guys.
Nice try.
That's very adorable." I think we're doing something with dinosaurs too. We'll let you see it in a couple weeks.
But what's really funny is before these movies happened in this town, they were both thought to be the same. They were both thought to be like a level of like potential.
Yeah, and then when you
So-
have Mario as the character, as big
Yeah.
as Mario was, of course it's like, oh yeah, this is going to be the.
Oh, going into
The
the
big
summer,
budget hit.
Yeah.
you look at Jurassic Park and Super Mario Brothers as tentpole, and obviously, even though Michael Crichton had written Jurassic Park,
But that's
everybody knew who Mario was. Everybody walking on the street, it was almost like by the 90s. New babies that were born just had that, you know how like kids are born, but they just kind of know who Chewbacca is. They know what the Beatles are. It's like you knew who Mario was, and so you knew that there was going to be this movie coming out. You knew who Mario was, Jacqueline, because you also apparently had a Nintendo before I did.
Yeah, so I was a product, I was a child of divorce and generational trauma. So we were buying affection through gifts in my household. I had a divorced dad in a different state, grandparents that didn't want to be alienated, and a new stepdad that was very happy to get my attention. So yeah, I had a Mario at 89. I had a Sega, baby.
I was going to say, I bet you were an early Genesis kid.
I had an early Genesis kid. I was an early Microsoft kid. And like, again, I was an only child. It wasn't like y'all though, because again, I was the girl that wanted to play these games. So like, I was playing the girly games by myself. Boys were the only ones that could do that sort of thing. And I will admit, my Mario stuff was limited. Like I did Mario for sure. Remember Mickey's Clubhouse, that Nintendo game?
That was an underrated
Mickey
game.
Mousecapade?
Yeah, like that one where it
yes.
was like the adventure. Oh my God, Castlevania. All of the
wow.
RPGs where it was just you and you just go long term. I love
Shadowgate.
those. But I would say Mario was not as good because everybody liked to play Mario in teams. Everybody liked to play like Luigi Mario. You die, you go. You die, you go. You die,
Oh
you
yeah,
go.
I
You die, you
always
go.
let my little brother be Mario because I was rooting for him to perish, and so I could be Luigi.
Yeah.
Because just like in sports terms, I was rooting for the underdog.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so I wanted to be Luigi, like the brother who the princess is not expecting to show up. She's like, "Oh, it's you,"
Yeah.
and I'm like, "Yeah, Mario died. I'm here."
But that's the difference too with even Sega. Like they had that with Sonic and Tails, but everyone just wanted to be Sonic. It was just about you and your solo adventure way more than it was
Sure.
about the other ones. Anyway, the whole point is, so I definitely had an early Mario, but I switched over to Sega very, very early. So literally NES is the only one I have. I never had a 64. I never had, I stopped. Like,
See, we got Sega Genesis late in the game too, and so by then Super Nintendo was already cropping up. And I remember, still very good friends to this day, the Whitehead family. They had a Super Nintendo early, and I think me and my brother were just like, we just kind of, we didn't even want a Super Nintendo for the longest time. We're like, no, we're good with Sega Genesis. We got Altered Beast, we got Golden Axe, we're good. And then we just kept going over to the Whiteheads to play like the Super Mario World, and we're like, this is a really good system.
if you had siblings, Super Mario NES was the perfect one because they had the 4 controller click in, and that literally like changed the game because then you could play 4-player, and that was really it for me.
Yeah.
So then the movie comes, and it almost seems like around this time in Hollywood, and going back to the 80s too, it's almost like studios begrudgingly made these movies based on other properties. Like, well, He-Man's really popular. We got to have a He-Man movie.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
Super Mario Brothers is really popular. I guess we got to have a Super Mario
Well,
movie.
see, but about that though. So something I find very interesting about that time, and I think this will explain, because the big question people always ask, especially nowadays, is like, why did Super Mario Brothers, this bright, colorful Mushroom Kingdom, peppy music, everything, turns into Blade Runner Jr. But
Facts.
I think you have to. I think you have to look at that past, because before, you'll probably remember this, like Transformers the movie, G.I. Joe the movie. You know, like a lot of the movies were very much, let's just take the cartoon or let's just take the thing and just extend it,
just make it longer,
like
right?
90 minutes, right? But then Batman comes along, and Batman was very much Batman at that time. Unless you were like a hardcore comic person, was very much okay. It's Adam West, the reruns of that show, or it's Super Friends, the cartoon. And then this Tim Burton movie comes along, and it's all dark, you know, at the time, and like Keaton playing Batman, and it's taken like a different level than what we've ever seen Batman
And
before.
you felt the streets and the
Yeah.
dirt
Yeah.
in Gotham City.
Exactly. And then after that, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comes out, and this again, except for the comic books. You got this wacky cartoon with these 4 turtles eating pizzas, yelling cowabunga, and now here's this movie where they're live action and they're dark. You know, it's dark, and it's got this more serious tone, more akin to the comics,
You
right?
felt the sewer.
You felt the sewer, right? You know? Then you got the Addams Family coming out. And the Addams Family, even though that was always kind of in that darker tone, but it was still a wacky sitcom, but now you've got this little bit edgier. It's PG-13. There's blood and references to
Yeah,
that.
that was early 90s.
Yeah,
it was
that
like
was-
early 90s was very gothy, very sort of like, you know,
Yeah, then you have Dick Tracy was after that. So I feel like that's what happened with Super Mario Brothers. I could see, because there's even like reports that say that Nintendo was very aware that they wanted to make something a little bit edgier. Maybe this wasn't exactly what they wanted, but there was this sort of concept of let's take these classic properties and do something a little bit edgier and more, you know, more all audiences with it, all ages with it, because that will justify it being in the movies, especially when you have, like even with Mario, you had the Super Mario Bros. Super Show, which is like, you had live action Mario and Luigi with Captain Lou Albano and Danny Wells. How do you make the movie look different? And so I could see them wanting to do that. It's just the process of getting there. Also a very weird thing.
Very weird thing. And then also I think what's interesting with it too is if you really look at it, as much as it's ridiculousness, it's the splitting of the difference. They also still made a camp movie.
Right.
And that was the part too, which I thought was interesting. If you look at the 2, I consider only performances within it that work, which is Dennis Hopper and Bob Hopkins. Again, British man playing Italian plumber. Didn't think it would work as well as it does, but it does work.
Yeah.
Like I made the joke.
He brought that Eddie Valiant in.
He did. He did.
I think it was a stroke of casting genius, the ethnicity aside, because Bob Hoskins was everybody, even if like kids didn't know his name, everybody saw Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which he starred in as Eddie
Another
Valiant.
dark one. Another dark one.
The advantage he had as Eddie Valiant, is that him and his co-star Roger couldn't do whiskey shots in between takes, like him and John Leguizamo did in this movie.
Please give me a shot.
Mhm.
Well, he did a shot in the movie, but then he like goes
Right.
over the air.
Yeah.
But so and so I think every kid just kind of knew, oh, this is an adult I trust, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And then you have again, John Leguizamo, the perfect sort of companion to him, playing that underdog role. He's maybe not quite as street smart as his much older brother, who isn't really related by blood. He just kind
No,
of
the casting wasn't bad.
Yeah.
Except for it's against type in the sense of like, these would not be the people I would think of, especially when you think of, again, Italian. I could just, if I was an Italian, I'd be livid. Like, let's be real. Like,
I'm pretty sure De Niro and Pacino said no.
you know, facts. Facts. But then when you look
Although
at
Pesci as King Koopa would have been pretty fun.
But so that point, he's doing Eddie Valiant. He's doing the straight man in a camp movie sort of performance so well. And then Hopper is just giving Sheriff in Nottingham realness. Like Sheriff in Nottingham
He is
realness.
all about it.
He is giving face and body, and he is just living his life with this thing. But that's the problem. These two guys are selling something that doesn't work when you put it next to each other. Like, you can't have that be humans. It worked when it was Hopkins and it was cartoons,
Mm-hmm.
and it'll work with Dennis Hopper if everybody else is in on the joke.
Yeah.
But you can't have these two very earnest performances that are in such contrast to themselves and even the world around them.
Well, that is obviously, and there's, like I said, there's been different articles and retrospectives about it. About that was one of the challenges with this movie, was that there were so many different versions of this movie, and they all leaned from it being dark because that was what some of the directors and original producers wanted, to it being lighter because it's Disney/Hollywood Pictures getting involved, and there were different writers, and even the script that the cast got when they got there was not the script that they got when they signed up. And so so that's what's so interesting to watch this movie, because you can tell. Like, you can almost see the different color pages of a script when you're watching it, because you're like, okay, that doesn't seem to connect with this, and that doesn't seem to connect with that. And, you know, in tradition of many cuts nowadays, there's also a longer cut of the movie that got released. There's a group called the Super Mario Brothers Movie Archive, who've been getting like interviews and all these like old things that we haven't seen from this movie, and they found like a longer version of this. It still has like time codes and stuff on it, but like it fills in some of the gaps that in the movie, or from the novelization that I may or may not have read.
The novelization.
Damn. I have the novelization of Willow.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Willow's a little more appreciated as fine art than the Super Mario Brothers
The
movie.
score tells a different tale, sir.
I'm surprised that the Super Mario Brothers movie got anything more than like those sticker books that you had when you
Yeah.
flip through and just like put the sticker where it belongs. And it seems like when you're watching this movie, all the stickers got jumbled up.
Yeah, but that's the one thing I will defend about this movie, because look, I can understand people talking about it being bad or being cheesy or whatever, but especially in this very nostalgic, let's reboot everything, let's think about everything. I'm not going to name any names, but there's definitely some movies that are now being put at like a high regard that I kind of look on the same level of at least cheesiness. If not, they could be better made, but at least from the cheese camp factor alone,
Yeah.
Super Mario Brothers is like right there. And I think what always just brings it down is that it's an adaptation of Mario. If you were to be like, man, there was this movie I used to rent back in the day, the VHS, where there were two dimensions where one side was dinosaurs.
If it was Orgasmo, like the Trey Parker, Matt Stone, like low budget random movie, like if it had that like Napoleon Dynamite indie budget to it, you're right. Yeah, it would have a totally different vibe.
That's one
to
of the
it.
things that producer Brian and I were talking, as all boys do. We make great points when we're in the bathroom together. And we were talking about how this movie is so more watchable if you're not comparing it to the video game. If it's just this random movie where it's just made for kids, I actually really appreciate the two-dimensional thing. I think that's the meteorite, they killed all the dinosaurs. It's Earth. They do mention 65 million years ago, which nobody knew that 65 million number until it was on the Jurassic Park poster. So
Well,
good on you
true.
doing your research, Super
Very
Mario
true.
team. It hits Earth and it creates this alternate dimension. I think that is a really cool premise, and I think that the movie does a salient job of, even for the kids, spelling out that there's this different world that's sort of below our world. And the Blade Runner thing you talk about, where it's like the different version of Manhattan.
Yeah, Dino Hatton.
Yeah, and people eating like hot dogs that are made out of bugs. It's like this cool thing that, these people are aware that they desperately want to get somewhere else.
Yeah, they show it right in the beginning of the movie. It was like they're human looking, but yet they still hatch from eggs, as Daisy does.
The lady pushing her egg, and she's like, "Get your hands off my baby!"
Yeah, and everything's like all electric based around, like all the cars and stuff like that. So but it is one of those weird things of like, but there is clearly these sort of darker, more adult tones that they try to clean up with like a score, like they put that Alan Silvestri score in there, where it's like, and you're like, no, I mean that's cute, but like clearly,
why do they call Alan Silvestri for cheesiness? Like he has done so many cheesy movies. I think just as favors, like he's got a few, like he did Judge Dredd.
Yeah.
He's a nice guy.
He's a nice guy.
I mean, he also did Back to the Future, and his score is criminally underrated for Young Guns, too.
But basically, because he did Back to the Future, and he's proven that he can really underscore these very poppy video game moments, they keep calling him. Don't get me wrong. I love the Ready Player One soundtrack, but I'm almost like, Alan Silvestri is not going to save your movie. You know what I mean? Like, the gods will not save you.
That's what they were trying to.
The one thing I will say about this is because I think when it comes to video game movies and why we have these terrible lists is one thing we can very much appreciate having watched shows like The Last of Us, having watched the early days of The Walking Dead, having watched the early days of Game of Thrones. When you have people who at least respect the material or at least respect the person who made the material enough to be respectful of the material as they adapt it, no matter what happens, I don't know. I just find like it doesn't go as far off the rails as the people who clearly are not. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like this is an example of the people who were making it didn't like it. They didn't care. They didn't like it enough to even try to come up with a good idea for how to be both faithful to it and then also expand it.
I feel like the makers of this film, and I don't want to put it just on the directors. I think that this is studio heads on down, looked at this property and looked at this movie they're making with that same eyes that even I do sometimes in my adulthood, where I'm like, oh, that's for kids.
Yeah.
So like you see anything animated and you just have that initial like, oh, okay, it's animated, it's for kids. It's not. Animation is not just for children. But when you look at Super Mario Brothers, I think the studio at the time was like, this is just for kids. Kids will just lap anything up as long as we put a familiar skin on it. And that's the difference between this and something like The Last of Us, where the care and sort of making sure that you're honoring the source material was a factor in every step of the process, as opposed to this, Andre, where it feels like where the moments where they said, oh, we need to make this more like Mario, maybe in post-production, like, let's just add this sound effect, let's just do this. That's where the movie falters.
Well, it's funny because, like I said, I think part of it is also, and I always try to go back to the time that it was made, because at the time, and we know so much about Mario now from its various games, but at the time you had the 3 Nintendo games, you had the Super Mario World, and there is definitely some lore in there, but definitely not to the level that we have at the time. Also, I can't help but to feel like there at least at that time, there was a little bit of like, this is popular, but how long is it going to last? Because we just came out of the video game crash of the 80s, and yet Nintendo brings it back, but there's probably still that feeling at that time until we got Genesis and this might end.
Like they felt like they were making a pet rock movie more than they felt that they were making a franchise.
Yeah. Of course, now looking back, it's like, of course, this was going to last forever, but who knows? But even still, like I said, because they were trying to go with that weird, like darkish tone, like they do with some of these other movies, it is still interesting to see how they incorporate certain things. Like if you look throughout Dino Hat, and there's like a big sweeping shot. You can look at some of the buildings and like there's a shop named Hammer Brothers. There's one named Bullet Bill. I mean, even the shoes that they wear, they incorporated the jumping with these really cool boots, which, talk about the movie, but if David River released those boots as actual shoes to buy, sneakerheads would buy those up immediately.
There'd be a line around the block.
So they, they figured out a way to do the jumping and then putting Bullet Bills in that. So they figured out all these different ways to use at least the names and the properties of it. I mean, you have Koopa, it's President Koopa as opposed to King Koopa. But, you have all these different ways that they did incorporate it. They even found a way to do the colors of Mario and Luigi towards the end. It's just, they're variations of how they do them, like with Goombas.
Oh, they gave you the colors? That is faithful.
Yeah. they
you
did.
Were reaching.
That's something. That's still something. Compared to like I said, compared to some things
they named it
don't
Super
do
Mario
it.
Brothers. That's something too.
They're still plumbers.
Yes,
They're
exactly.
still plumbers.
They were named Mario and Luigi.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
I'm so happy for you.
As you should be. Because at that time, that was something. I mean, like I said, it's very
Fair.
easy.
At that time. You know what? At that time, that was something, but
Did you walk out of the theater?
Did you
walk out of the theater in '93 when you saw this movie for the first time? Did you say, "Oh, that was a good movie. I need to see it again," or were you just?
I saw it again because I think that's why I do get into this. What you're talking about when you look at things more critically nowadays. I think there was a vibe, at least in my circle, there was a vibe of like we felt the edginess of this compared to the video game, and that was something we actually like because we were right at that age of like can't watch the rated R stuff yet. But a little bit too old for some of the younger stuff. But this is like one of those things of like how I feel about this is probably how like some kid felt when they saw the first Transformers movie, where it's just like, oh, this is different. And we're looking at like, this is not like the cartoon, but they were probably like, oh, this is different from the cartoon. That's how sometimes I feel about that with Mario. It's like, this felt like something that was like, ooh, it's Mario, but
when
it's...
did the first Transformers come out? 2000?
Yeah. But
I think that was high school.
Yeah. But that's what I'm saying. It just had this different vibe to it. And especially for someone like myself who literally watched like the Super Mario Brothers Super Show and seeing that version of it where it was very goofy, very comical, you know, like it just had this different vibe to it. And having grown up watching like I said, other movies like Batman, Ninja Turtles, and Addams Family, and all that, it felt like it was in that vein that at the time, I didn't even take into account like, oh, this is bad or this is not super faithful. It was just like, I saw Mario, I saw Luigi, I saw some things referenced. I saw there's a woman named Bertha, and I know that's a fish from Mario 3. I know that the garbage men are Sniffets.
Toad,
and, Toad is in there.
There's an interesting point you bring up, though, with just being a kid and seeing your characters that, again, if you're a kid, you're just buying into this is Mario and Luigi.
Yeah.
And seeing them just act differently than they did in the game. They were actually real people in this one, to a certain extent, because in the game, your quest is to rescue this princess, right? But it's such a benign, it's like, oh, thank you, Mario, you're my hero. But you never really, when you see John Leguizamo actually be smitten with Daisy, and he's asking around, they go on this awkward double date. You're kind of like, oh, this is what adults do. I'm growing up. I'm hitting puberty as I'm watching this movie, because they're plumbers and they're video game characters, but they're real people and they have real needs, Jacqueline.
Yeah, that's why they made the Goombas dance.
That's right. Because they're evil, but they have a little bit of a heart. And something...
That was the dumbest setup. No,
that
we are
so
not...
beautiful.
I see how quickly y'all just want to turn the page.
No, I'm all about it. Let's talk about the elevator scene. I love that scene.
Goomba.
The Goombas dance.
The Goombas
you want to tee us up?
As I said,
yeah,
they're loyal and stupid, as Koopa says in there. But yes, they're in the elevator. They're wearing the iconic outfits now, and they're trapped in the elevator with Goombas. And so to try to distract them, there's a little song playing in the background. And so they just sway. Luigi starts swaying the Goombas. And then they just start to dance. And it's just a cute little moment. It's a cute moment with the Goombas.
Because he outsmarted literally their biggest foe with the power of swaying.
But they're not, they're like too bright. And it's a very cute elevator scene. It's like the Ninja Turtles, the Bay Turtles scene when they're in the elevator doing a little hip hop.
I'm going to let you have this one and the road chimp.
But there is something I do want to give.
Everyone has their things.
I'll come back for that
Everyone has their things.
I do have to give this movie. I think this is something that I do have to give credit for with the movie, even compared to movies today. And that is the production of this movie. Just the design of this movie and how, even if it looks dirty, just how real it feels. Something, I saw someone mention this in a YouTube video talking about the movie, but I didn't even realize it. There's a part where Koopa is in his office, and you can see from his window the actual set of Dino Hatton, from his window. And it is the legit set they were on earlier. And just feeling that depth is really cool, because it's especially nowadays with a lot of things being CG, even the backgrounds, everything. It's nice to see that they did go to North Carolina and make this entire Dino Hatton be a real place and put all these people in it. So that way, when you're seeing them running through this, you feel that grunginess sometimes of them going through Dino Hatton.
I thought that the Dennis Hopper as Koopa, I thought that was a stroke of casting genius.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why. It's because it did remind me of the same way that the Sonic movies cast Jim Carrey as Dr. Robotnik, because if you are a parent and you're taking kids to see this movie, you know who Dennis Hopper is. You've seen Dennis Hopper for a decade. You've seen him in stuff like Easy Rider. You know this guy. This guy's an actor, okay? So he's at least somebody that you can glom onto. And I will say his performance, without getting too political, reminds me of somebody who you may have seen in the news.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that was the best.
It's almost like Trump saw this movie and is like, that's the guy I gotta be.
And a germaphobe as well.
And a germaphobe. And it was honestly the best part about it. It was so earnest. Like I said, Sheriff of Nottingham realness. He was really about it.
I just remember being in this movie, and this is before you walk in, you know what the running time and all that stuff is. I do remember wondering, okay, I get what you're doing here. I didn't think the movie was good when I saw it in the theater, and I remember being like, how much longer we got to be here? Because I do want to go home and watch and play Super Mario Brothers. It at least made me want to play the game again. But I also remember this movie not really spelling out to you that we're getting towards a conclusion, or it just kind of felt like we're just keep existing in this world for a long time. So I remember feeling the length of this movie, and it maybe felt longer than the actual runtime was.
Well, then
Yeah.
you should watch the director's cut.
Oh,
which
yeah,
is
I
even
can't
longer.
wait to-
Because he needs that, right?
Yeah.
He needs that in his
Look,
life.
yeah, I do definitely agree that, like, even again with the script changes and everything, that probably muddled it up a little bit. But yeah, I do agree that, like, there's a really good story element in this. And then going back to Dennis Hopper's performance, this is something I didn't even notice till recently, because they talk about how they're evolved from dinosaurs, and so with Dennis Hopper, King Koopa, he's evolved from the Tyrannosaurus Rex. I didn't notice until recently. He constantly has like his arms like close to him, kind of like T-Rex arms when he's talking and stuff. And so I was like, oh, that's a really neat little thing that he
Also, the
added there.
posture of the maybe person. Have you noticed how that's said that? Like, hey guys.
Yeah, very true, very true.
The posture of the maybe person is an all-time
I live
quote
on
from this show.
I live on this internet, and I will not pretend that I don't.
The
Yeah.
posture
yeah.
of the
So-
maybe person.
Yeah.
Well, like
But
I,
yeah.
I will say this, and this goes back to like my love of sports, is that you watch a season, right?
Mhm.
And you can more often than not point to when a team lost a critical game and then they go on a run. And it's like, oh, maybe that was the turning point. This was not necessarily the turning point yet for video game movies, because for every good one that we got, like Mortal Kombat 95, we got, it seems like, a dozen bad ones.
But Mortal Kombat is, I love Mortal Kombat, absolutely, one of
Right.
the best. But there's cheesiness in that as well.
Certainly.
For
but
sure.
but that one, it felt like the source material was more naturally ingrained
Right.
into.
Well, they based it off of as much as they could off of the actual.
Right, because the Super Mario Brothers game arguably gave you more story than you got with the Mortal Kombat game, but they still pulled something out of it.
Mhm.
But now we actually look forward to video game movies, especially something like this new The Super Mario Brothers the movie, because it feels like we know how to do it. And I think the world of animation serves Mario so well,
Oh, yeah.
because it's more seamless for all the youths that are going to be going to this movie and seeing like, oh, Mario looks like this in the video game, looks like this. This is just I just have less pressure on me because I don't have the controller. Like, I think this movie coming out, I think this is going to be gigantic. I think it's going to be over $1 billion.
Yeah. But I think that's also very telling of our time. I think at that time, when the 93 movie came out, it was this concept, even like you said, with some of the creators, is like, well, we don't want to just make the game a live action and that's it. Like, we got to put our edge on it. We got to put our spin on it because I'm the director, I'm the producer, whatever.
Right.
Whereas I feel like we are now in that era of The Last of Us and of this movie of just like, no, we need to be as close to the source material as possible. Ask Sonic. You know,
Yep.
which that's still the one thing that I always think about. Just
I
complete
actually think
side
that
note.
was the turning point in video game
Yeah.
movies. I think that was
Changing Sonic's
actually
design.
no. I think that was
teeth?
no. I think that
Sonic
was the
going to
change
the
with
dentist?
studios, because the director
Mhm.
told them.
Yeah.
The director was like, "Y'all are idiots," and the director was like, "This is stupid." And the studio told them. Granted, this was in the messy part of Paramount when they were still trying to figure stuff out. They were dealing with the Redman. The studio just pushed ahead with their ideas, and it went so badly, so quickly
Yeah.
that they were like, "You were right. Let's switch it over." And I think that switched in the sense of like, trust the nerds. The nerds know,
Right.
because they know what the angry effers are going to say if we don't get this
They're
right.
giving us a sneak preview on Twitter as to how this movie is going to be received
And
if we don't
so
embrace
if
it.
we
Yeah.
like now, I think studios are paying attention to that to be like, listen to the nerds. The
Right.
nerds know, and the nerds, because there's been enough success to where they have to listen. Up until that point, they'd kept messing it up enough to where they didn't have to listen.
Right.
They've
Yeah.
been interfering enough to where certain things were successful and certain things weren't. Again, I still do believe video game adaptations are hard, so don't hire the wrong team. That's where the studio messes up first. But the second part is, if you hire the right team, listen to them.
Yeah. And then there was no 93 or 90 through Twitter for them to
No.
listen to how Mario was coming out, because you probably would have heard some of these things. Also, just as a side, I am very, very shocked. Maybe it was because of Super Mario Brothers failure. I'm surprised we did not get like a Sonic the Hedgehog movie of the 90s, just of how big he was. Like, but like a puppet, like costume character.
Like a
I
Ninja
think
Turtle. Yeah.
I think they wanted to. I think the same reasons why, because remember, this actually had a high watermark for a while. This
Yes.
was kind of like cleared the way for at least 5 years before they really went back into video
And
games.
it scarred Nintendo for a generation
Yeah,
from
and
they
lending
literally-
their properties to any
And
sort of big screen
Yeah.
adaptation.
So
Absolutely.
what we had after this were like Blank Man and like Meteor Man and like random little superhero adaptations
Two
that were
underrated films, in my opinion.
Yes.
true, but movies that were not intended
Mhm.
to be whatever. And that, by the way, Meteor Man and Blank Man, guess what they gave Worth to, which changed it all in the end? Blade.
There you go.
That was it. That was literally the progression of it.
Yeah.
That's how that went. And
Blank
so
man.
Steel would like to have a word.
and steel, yes, and steel. But literally, for a long time, they were
Yeah.
just these B movies that you would send to either crappy former TV stars or
Basketball players.
basketball players, athletes, whatever. Put them in a suit because they have a built-in audience.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it still might have just been Shaq walking around as an Orlando Magic uniform
Exactly,
with the stuff on top. But
exactly.
I mean, look, Super Mario Brothers, for what it's worth, I think that it did. Whether it intended to do it this way or not, it shaped the future of video game movies, and it gave at least a starting point to grow from, and
Right.
that's where we are now in 2023 with all these great video game possibilities that we actually look forward to. We think they could be quality entertainment.
Yeah, and say what you will about the campiness, the cheesiness, the badness, or whatever about Super Mario Brothers, but I think there's something to be said, and I'm sure Mario's involvement has a lot to do with it, but this is literally 30 years later. People are still talking about this movie. There's still videos about this movie. There's still discussion about the movie. There's still thoughts about this movie when making another video game adaptation. And I don't know. For me, I will always appreciate a way out there movie that's wrong that I remember over a safe movie that is bland that I will forget the moment I
Facts.
walked out the theater. And
Oh,
I think Super
that's
Mario
nice.
Brothers is so that movie. It is so that even if you don't like it, you are not going to forget it. And there's something very special about that. And I think also even the way that the movie is made, just even the process of this movie, because remember, this was a movie that major studios wanted to do, and they went with the independent studio because they knew they would have a little bit more control, I guess, or they thought they did, as well as, there's also like merchandising and things like that. But like even just that concept of it, like that's something we don't see nowadays. There's no way that some like random like indie studio is going to go, I'm going to take the biggest property that you have and make a movie out of it. So yeah, it's just some interesting things about that movie making that even though it went off the rails, there's a fascination about it that you would not see in movies nowadays.
And there's varying reports about how well this movie did at the box office, but on its best day, it might have recouped its budget because
Yeah.
the budget I think was maybe like 40 million ish, and
Yeah.
it might have gotten there worldwide.
right, but they wanted. They obviously wanted this to be a hit, and then like
They thought it could be Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
and then Jurassic Park showed up.
Yeah.
It was
2
like,
weeks later.
No, they thought it could be Jurassic Park.
How excited are you for the new Super Mario Brothers movie? Are
I
you like
am-
losing your mind?
I am very excited. The animation, like you said, the animation definitely lends itself to this property. And I think that what I like about, at least from what I've seen so far, is I love that they are incorporating different references in a very unique way. Like the score is a mix of a movie score, but with Super Mario sounds in it. They made a fake commercial that uses the theme song from the Super Mario Brothers Super Show with the Mario Brothers implements a game and others who get all the fame.
How you feeling about that voice?
The voices it's the typical thing. It's like we get all the celebrities to do the voices, and they're gonna do what they're gonna do. But
It sounds like Charlie Day's giving it his all.
I like
Yeah,
how
Jack
Charlie
Black
Day
is
sounds as
Bowser.
Luigi.
Yeah.
Jack Black is
So
Bowser.
I'm like,
yeah.
so
I think it's gonna. I don't think that is gonna be a deterrent.
look at you. That's the realest thing you've said.
What the-
You're like, I don't think that's gonna be a deterrent,
No,
and that is the only
no.
thing about that you've been honest
No,
about.
but no, what? No, I'm very excited about this movie. Yes. Are there other people I would have cast in some of these parts? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, I don't think that is going to take away from the movie. And I think the people they got are going to give the best they're going to give.
And just don't take Spike away from my boy Sebastian Maniscalco. 'Cause
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
no. By the way, though, but that's what I'm saying. So I'm very also excited for Anya because I want to see her
Yes.
do voice because I've always said that she does amazing face, which means that I think she does really great nonverbal acting.
Mhm.
Like she does
Oh,
really
yeah.
great like Split. The reason why that movie works is because you see everything working out on her
Right,
face
right.
as we just watch this dude go insane. So I'll be very interested to see how she is just a vocal performance.
Yes, and just as I have to give a note again, Yoshi, the Yoshi in there is
Yeah.
super cute. Like I
Yeah.
said, and no, again, upstaged by a big T-Rex a few weeks later. But
Yeah.
I thought at the time that animatronic, that Yoshi was very, very adorable. There's a lot of things to like about this movie, as insane as this movie is. And the fact that this cast, with all that was going on with it, gave their all as best they could. I think John Leguizamo and Bob Hoskins had good chemistry.
Fair.
It's at least worth a watch one time.
All right, so Andre Meadows says it's a blast.
It's a blast, yes.
Let's hit that music and transition to our close, Brian. If I make you President Koopa of entertainment, right? Do you release this movie like on streaming services? I think it's kind of cool that it's hard to get.
I want a full on like 30th anniversary, but like,
Okay.
like a 30th anniversary release, but like no holds barred. Like tell all the stories, tell how insane it was. Like we're okay with it. We'll put the little disclaimer, the opinions of whatever does not match the studio.
It wouldn't
and just let it all out. I think people would appreciate that.
I wouldn't hate like a 3-part documentary about the making.
Oh,
of this movie.
this has document like streaming documentary written all over it.
I would not hate it. What I loved is having you finally in studio, Andre. It was so great. We've been
Yes.
talking about you being on the show
Aw.
for, there's so many properties, whether it's Ninja Turtles or Sonic, that you celebrate online. But having you here for Super Mario Brothers, this is like sort of the culmination.
I mean, it was definitely not bad having the wiki article literally sitting across for us for the entire episode. Oh my god!
Before I forget,
god!
I also have this is not the novelization, but this is like the behind the scenes
Microchips to
From
movie
Microchips
stars.
to movie stars.
Oh my god!
Wow.
Has official art from the movie and everything, and,
You
and
are
the behind the
such
scenes.
a nerd.
I love this movie.
I don't say
love-
that as a diss. That was a compliment.
No,
No,
absolutely.
that's how he's
wow.
known. Black Nerd Comedy, wherever you
special movie
enjoy
for me.
your online endeavors. What you got going on? You got stuff coming out. I'm sure you're probably going to be doing some stuff covering the release of Super Mario Brothers, the movie.
Yeah, we'll definitely check out the Super Mario Brothers movie and whatever movies. I'm excited. Like, this is a very interesting time for me because it's like I actually was in the theater not too long ago, and the trailer for the Super Mario Brothers movie came up, and then immediately after was a trailer for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Mutant Mayhem, and I'm just like, I am living my best life.
You
right
should
now.
do that like
And then
Easter video. Be like, it's me season.
It's me season.
You know what
yeah.
I mean?
Power
Reuse
Rangers is
me.
back with a 30th anniversary special. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, this is it took long enough. It took long
You
enough.
earned it.
Like
Talk
you,
up to
yeah.
Marvel and DC all you want to. That's fun, but I over here, it is
You-
Mario, it is Power Rangers, it is Sonic, it is Spider-Man in the Spider-Verse, and it is Ninja Turtles.
Just
Wow.
check out Andre again, Black Nerd Comedy, wherever you enjoy going online. YouTube's probably a great hub for that. And he just, when you're watching him, he's funny, endearing, makes you feel like a kid, and celebrate all this stuff that we loved once upon a time and can still love well into adulthood. For this show, rate, subscribe, do all that great stuff that you love doing wherever you listen to us or watch us. Do whatever that platform encourages you. For our special guest, Andre, Black Nerd Comedy Meadows, Jacqueline Coley, producer Brian Remsen's hanging out here with us. I am Amelia Mark Ellis, and the whole gang here at Rotten Tomatoes. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week. And we're sorry, Mario, your princess is in another castle.
Jesus.